Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 2, Episode 4 of We Hunt Together. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately picking up after the events of Episode 3, obviously they're trying not to let anyone leave the scene until they get a suspect, because of course Larry doesn't have surveillance footage or anything like that, because he's like, oh yeah, the guy I asked to do it didn't come through. So it's like, yay, now they have no idea who it is that stabbed Dom. They don't even know what, I mean, at the very least you'd have some idea who you're looking for, because you'd be able to tell it by at least their outfit. The thing is, Jackson ends up chasing after one person and Lola ends up going after another. I'm assuming the person Lola went after was Lester, and the person Jackson went after was Henry. Because it's interesting, because later on, Jackson ends up, he had run into a biker delivery person, and that person had a camera, and they drove past that bike that that person he was chasing got away on, and it turns out that was Lester's bike. But I don't think the person that was running from him was Lester. I think that was probably Henry who hopped on Lester's bike, because maybe it was the easiest one there. Like, I don't know whether Lester really hoped that. I'm curious, what did he already have this set up that if he took his bike there, that or did Henry take that because maybe he's secretly been following Freddy or something? That's what I don't know. Like, the fact is his bike is there, but he's like, oh yeah, it was stolen. But then Jackson's like, why didn't you report it stolen when it was immediately stolen? And he never gets an answer for that. So I did think it was interesting, because obviously he ties it back to Lester, and Susan goes with them to kind of ease things over while they're kind of doing the interrogation without making it seem like an interrogation. But he has an alibi with his wife, and it's like, and Jackson tries to trip him up by being like, oh, it was Graham that was who lost, wasn't it? And it's like, oh. And I love Lester being cheeky, being like, I kind of find that hard to believe, considering he's in this episode and he's the star. So, but that kind of implies like he knows that information because he's seen this episode, this most recent episode or something like that of it. So that kind of allowed him to cover his bases. So, or maybe it is just like, no, like it is proof that he did see the episode or something like that. Either way, Jackson wasn't able to trip him up the way he wanted to. So that kind of backfired. But it's like, yeah, Lester's definitely like the calm, cool, and collected type. Because even Baba, like, the one time like he interacted with Jackson, you could tell like he was nervous and stuff like that. But once again, this season kind of presents itself in a very interesting dynamic that I haven't really talked about, and I should have, but it is interesting that, I mean, obviously throughout series one, we already knew about Baba and Freddy. Now we have a component to this that's a mystery, because we as the audience have no idea who's actually behind all this. It seems like it's Lester. He seems like the number one suspect. It seemed like he even kind of confirmed it, the red shoes and everything, but we'll see. Not unless he just ends up being a different, like, player in all of this. Like, maybe he's got his own side of things, but I think Lester is the actual killer. Like I said, I think he's the one Lola ran into, the one that was like cheeky and was able to kind of like circle back around her. So, and the fact is, because it's interesting, because later on he calls about what happened with Dom and everything. The moment she was like, yeah, I was on the phone with Lester, I was like, oh, interesting. But yeah, because that was like 3 days later, so thought that was fascinating. Some other interesting information I found out, because I didn't realize this. The actor who plays Liam is Colin Morgan, and I've been watching the intro over and over again, but it wasn't until this time and I was like, Colin Morgan. I was like, why does that name sound so familiar? And I had to stop, and I was like, wait a minute. And I thought about what Liam looks like. I was like, wait, is that? And I looked it up to confirm it. It is. It's the actor who played Merlin in the show Merlin. I was like, oh my God. Because I think he's Irish. Because I think that was probably also throwing me off, because in Merlin he has a British accent. To my recollection. It's been a long time since I've seen Merlin. The show ended over 10 years ago, so he's a little older, but now in retrospect, still like, no, he still looks the same. It's just, he also has facial hair. As Merlin, he didn't have facial hair, so that's throwing me off. But like, because I binged the show like 7 years ago, maybe, At the time, it was on Netflix, specifically U.S. Netflix. I have to specify that because obviously what's on Netflix changes depending on what country you live in. But also, like with licensing rights and stuff like that, I don't even know if it's still up there now. So, but yeah, I was like, oh man, I can't believe I didn't But once again, it's just like, yeah, it's been over like 7 years or something since I've seen it. So once again, plus the accent and everything. But yeah, I was like, oh man, that's so neat. But yeah, everything between him and Lola, like Lola was kind of freaked out when it's like, wait, why are you just in my apartment? It's like, well, you gave me your keys. She's like, no, I didn't give you not apartment. I think it is like an actual just like house. But it's like, I didn't give you the keys. I gave you the keys to lock up, not to just come and go whenever you want to, which is ironic because we know he copied Freddy's key, so that's interesting. But I knew he was a little weird and creepy, but I knew, like, it's like, yeah, he's off the suspect list. He's just doing some shady stuff. Well, he ended up pointing Lola to the We Hunt Together line in the comments, and that the together is a link, but neither one of them has the password. So, but they're still kind of doing their thing, but Lola's suspicious of him to the point she's looking him up, and even Jackson being like, okay, like obviously if he is a suspect in all of this, or at least he's involved in this investigation, you have to end your relationship. Or Jackson's like, or I could just pretend like I didn't see anything, and kind of not even acknowledge the fact that you're looking into the guy that you're kind of into, you like him, without having any real reason to look into him. Because she could feel something was off, and while she's stalking Freddy, she finds out Liam's kind of doing the same thing. That's the thing. Like, they are very similar in what they're doing. They're both kind of... She's not going as far as Liam is, breaking into Freddy's apartment. But, yeah, I mean, she did it last season. She's doing it this season where she's just, like, staking out Freddy's place. And I love that bit where it's just like... She's like, oh, yeah, brilliant idea, when they were talking about, like, questioning Lester, and she hung up, and Jackson calls her back, you didn't say goodbye. She's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that. He's like, no, you said brilliant, thank you, and then hung up. And he's like, come on, can we at least promise to say goodbye to each other? She's like, bye, Jackson, and hangs up. He's like, thank you, that's very, and she's like smiling at it afterwards. I'm like, I love how cheeky she is. I love it so much. But yeah, I thought it was also interesting too when like Liam broke into Freddy's place, and Freddy immediately came back to get her phone or something like that, and then she noticed that like the top to that thing was off. It was a little crooked, and she put it back on properly. Like, that's the second time. Like last episode, she kind of got that feeling with Dom, and she got it this time as well. And I was like, ooh, where's he hiding at? And the moment she leaves, I was like, oh, he's in that dark corner. There he goes, like popping out of a dark corner. I was like, ooh. So all of this prompts Lola to like break into his van. She stashes out in there, which previous episode I was under the impression he sleeps in there. It does seem like there's a bed and stuff, but I don't know where he was when she broke in. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't live out of his. Maybe he does sometimes, but I was under the impression like he lives out of his van, but maybe he sleeps in there from time to time or something. Maybe he does actually have his own place. I don't know. Either way, Lola breaks in, finds the teddy bear. Now she's starting to get worried. Then he drives off in the van. I thought maybe at the last second, like the moment he stopped just for that second, I thought she'd get out, close the door softly and bounce, but she kind of got stuck in there. And we kind of find out the situation with Liam. For one, we knew previously from last episode that he was divorced, but we also find out he has a little girl. The teddy bear was for her. And I love that he's like, what are you going to do, spread me? And she's like, what? He's like, yeah, it's a butter knife, Lola. What are you going to do with that? And he explains everything. It's like, right. When he was offered to do Freddy's book, when he got paid for that, Simon's family is willing to pay him like $100,000 to find anything that can prove Freddy is guilty. And it's like, oh, I don't know if we ever really heard too much of, well, we know about I'm thinking about Matt. I was about to say, like, well, we know Matt had because I was about to say Simon had a significant other, but I was like, no, we know Matt had one. I guess they never really dived into Simon's circumstances, so it's like, oh, his family must be pretty well off if they're willing to offer like $100,000 or something like that to, and you also have to do like conversion rate between like, I'm assuming, pounds to like dollars, but either way. They're willing to give him a lot of money for this, so, and now look, I figured that's what it was, like, I figured like my thought was, and I said this previously, was I thought it was more like he's trying to get both sides of the story because he's trying to get the more juicier story by having both sides to it. I figured whatever he was doing with Lola was for like not the great, like, not for sinister ulterior motives, but just motives that were just kind of more, like, selfish. It turns out they are. And Lola's like, oh, so everything between us. He's like, no. Like, the fact of the matter is, because he does like Lola, but, you know, it's like, oh, I was pumping you for information, but I also liked you. But once again, he did take advantage of it. But he also was pointing her in the right direction. He figured he could kill two birds with one stone, help Lola take Freddie down, because he's like, oh yeah, like Freddie is super shady, but he also likes her. And then he's also going to be helping Simon's family in the long run. So it's more like three birds, one stone type of situation. But yeah, Lola didn't appreciate that. Does seem like he was being honest about, like, right, he has a gambling issue, so he has like no money, and it seems like that's probably what led to potentially the divorce and stuff. But he can only see his daughter like unsupervised stuff, and like this is her birthday and such. So, and just Lola's beating herself up a little because she really liked him, and it's like, here I am again falling for. Here I am, like, I'm let my guard down. I should have kept my guard. Like, she keeps her guard up around people, and she let her guard down, and she feels stupid for not realizing it, that she was being used. You know, so. I think that really, and then since we're going through Lola stuff, there's all the Jackson stuff this episode too, because like you could tell Jill was like, oh, how was Dom? You could tell like she was trying to gauge like, did Dom tell him or not? And then at the dinner table, while they're eating the pizzas or whatever, Dom's like, yeah, there's something I wanted to tell you, because Dom's doing good, so that's really good. But then, like, as she said, because like, you could tell the look on Jill's face the entire time. She was like, oh, you're talking to Dom. Is Dom going to say anything? Is she going to? And she does. And he's like, thanks, Dom. And he's so upset that he just leaves. And, yeah, he said he was just going to go to the bathroom. He just left the house entirely and just, yeah. And Lola went to go check up on him. And it's like, right, Jill wants time to explain, because for her, it's not, like, even she's not sure. Because I thought it's been a year, but maybe it hasn't, like, I forgot. They tell you the time frame at the first episode, but I don't remember now. It's been a little while. But I want to say it was like, I thought it had been like a whole year. So either that affair did keep going for a little while long afterwards, or either way, she doesn't know how long. I mean, she doesn't know who the baby daddy is. It could still be Thomas's, or it could be Jackson's. But even I was like, yeah, how long were you going to wait until the baby came out? And it's like, well, probably like get some more, like, probably didn't want to, well, I guess there's sneakier ways to do it, because it's like, well, your children have half your husband's DNA, so like, I guess you only had to get DNA from like your son or your daughter. But I guess like maybe they're not at that point where they could really tell that. I would assume as far along as she is, I mean, I don't know all there is, like, the trimesters and stuff like that, like all there is to know about pregnancy. So I don't know, like, but I would assume they're at that point where you could take DNA. But I think at certain points, like, it is dangerous to do that for the baby, I think. So I think you do have to wait pretty late in the pregnancy to do it, because you can't do it early on because it could hurt or damage. That's my understanding, but that could be a misconception on my part. But either way, I was like, that's rough. And Lola's even saying, like, if I were you, you could stay with me, and you never have to, I would never talk to that woman again. But Jackson kind of snaps back at her, like, right, yeah, of course I'm going to take love advice from the person who hates themselves and kind of doesn't let people get close to him. It's like, yeah, Lola has a lot of self-hatred when it comes to herself. But she tried not to take what Jackson said to too much offense, because I think him saying what he said, at the same time she's dealing with the whole Liam situation, but it's like, right, here's the keys, like, just in case you end up changing your mind. And he rolls up on a place, and I'm like, that's going to be Thomas's, isn't it? And Thomas is like, oh, we can talk about this later. I'm like, you're trying to have a civil conversation with a guy that's pissed, who has every right to be pissed, and you're going to end up calling. I mean, yes, Thomas has the right to call the cops, but I'm going to be frank, that was a bitch move. It's like, come on, son. What do you expect? You're having an affair with a man's wife, and you might be the baby daddy. He's allowed to be pissed off. He's like, all right, you can call the cops, and I'm going to stay right here. The cops roll up. Jackson probably would have been able to avoid all that, but be like, hey, I'm a cop too. Wouldn't have made things easier, but it probably would have made things a little smoother. But probably also didn't have his badge on him and everything. So he pushed one of the officers, because he's also drunk a little. So, and Thomas just casually goes back, and I'm like, you're so casual about it, like almost like you're looking down, like, oh, I pity him. It's like, motherfucker, like, I'm like, don't don't act like you're so blasé about it. Like you're the bad guy in this situation. You're ruining a marriage and a family. So, but luckily Lola was there to pick up Jackson, and Lola's like, you can stay at my place if you need to. He's like, no, I just want to go home and hug my kids. Can't even do that because Jill left with the kids. It's like, yeah, I've left with the kids. I've left with the kids until we're in a place where we can talk, which is kind of fucked up. It's like you kind of, because I think, especially for Jackson, it's like, I'm being punished for you being in the wrong here. So it's like, probably should have, once again, kind of like that, But I guess it's like, right, he wanted to give her another shot after everything went down last season. And it's like, yeah, because it's like, yeah, because I think that's why it cuts even deeper. It's like, I forgave you after last season, and now here we are again. And it's just like, what was the whole point of forgiving you? Like, we were going to work on us, and it just kind of meant nothing. Now I'm finding out this big thing, So, poor Jackson. It's like, that's a rough situation. Super, super rough. But aside from all of this, Freddie got an interesting call this episode about, what's the character's name? Was it Sheila? Sheila Brown? And the moment Freddie heard that name, because it's like, oh, she had a stroke and you're kind of someone she wanted to contact, and you see that her wrist with the eye tattoos, and you're like, which I'm assuming those are tattoos. I was like, oh, and I mean, after all these years, it would make sense why they still be there if they had to be tattooed. So I'm like, that's interesting. And now also, because I was kind of under the impression that belonged to a male or something like that, because I knew it was from her time at the in juvie, but I didn't realize. But I guess it makes sense. I don't know, because I know, like, because I guess like juvie's kind of like prisons. So, like, I guess in my head, I just assumed it was a male, but I think at, like, a male prison and maybe maybe juvies a little differently. Maybe they're a little more, like, male and females work there. Maybe that's specifically a juvie thing, or maybe it's just, because I could think only male guards work at male prisons, but female guards and male guards can work at a female prison. I think, obviously, like, female guards have to handle certain other elements that male guards aren't supposed to. Or maybe that's a very rare thing of, like, a female jail having both. I just feel like it'd probably be super unsafe for, like, a woman to be at a men's prison. I mean, but maybe that's my misconception. I'm just basing that on, like, some of the shows I've watched that have prisons, most recently, like Mayor of Kingstown. But tangents and all that aside, it never crossed my mind to think it was a woman that did that. And it seems like Miss Brown got in trouble for abuse, or at least she was kind of found at least not guilty of it or something like that. So, but it wasn't just Freddie, it was also other people too. I mean, we got a little inkling of that because apparently Freddie did something, but Freddie was like, it wasn't me. Still got, very Buffalo Bill. It's like, oh, it puts the lotion on its skin or it gets the hose again. Kind of felt almost a little like that. And I guess Freddie hasn't really thought, like, it's so interesting that such a thing is so implemented in her mind to the point that she drew it on Simon's feet. I mean, once again, the writers of the show probably hadn't thought that far ahead. They probably, like, knew it was like a little thing. They probably hadn't worked out the significance of it, but they probably knew it, like, had to be something related to, like, some trauma or something like that. Maybe they had some inkling even back then, but now we retroactively have added, history and lore to it. But even Freddie admitted, she's like, honestly, I didn't remember it, but it was so intrinsic to her now that she even says, like, every time I close my eyes, I see it. Probably, like, it seems like that room she was locked up in a lot was very dark and got treated the way she did. It's like, what did she do and that she got blamed for that deserved, I'm sure nothing she did would ever deserve being hosed down like that. To be fair, this is after the whole Kian situation. This is also after the whole Frederica thing of, like, you pushed him down the stairs, you also pushed her in the water. So it's not like you were, like, the most innocent child, but still. It just layers upon layers of stuff led Freddie to be who she is. But like I had brought up earlier, it was interesting that you see her rattled because, and I think, like I said, it plays into last episode. I said the whole thing about how Lola said, like, right, you won't be able to control this because Freddie just thinks she's so in control. The whole Baba thing, she was kind of pretty in control of Baba to some extent, but to a good chunk of extent, but like the whole Lester thing is she's not as in control of this as she assumes she is. I think some of that control is kind of waning away, but everything's kind of like life-wise is kind of hitting her all at once. And this happens, and she goes on the trip with Henry, and Henry brings up Freddie. He's like, yeah, it's been about, is like this next couple days will be like the 15-year anniversary of her death. And it's like, yeah, I just miss her like crazy. And Freddie's like, yeah, I just remember the last time I saw her, that like butterfly like thing in her hair clip. And he's like, I thought the last time I thought you said you didn't see her. I thought you said that you woke up and she was already gone. And it was like, oops. And she's like, I didn't mean like literally the last time, just like that last day we had to get ready to go. He was like, right, yeah, of course. He doesn't believe her. But regardless, he refuses to let her go because he is in love with her. But how much of it is just like your general love for her ever since you were a kid, but coupling that with the fact is that she is the last connection to your sister, and she's using your sister's name too. So like, there's weird like complications to like I think all the feelings he's feeling is, yes, there's love, but there's other stuff too that's getting coupled with that love. I think it's obsession I think it's kind of getting mixed into that as well. But Freddie goes and sees Miss Brown, and because Lester had left her some poison, well, the Birdman, because now let's we find out it's not actually Lester, because it still could be the case. It seems like all signs point to him, but still, it might be something else something else at play here. Now that I'm sitting thinking about, once again, I threw it out last episode, maybe Robert isn't as dead as we think he is, but because not less Lester was one of the people, and the other person was Robert. The one Lola ran into, what if that was actually Robert, or whoever was on the bike was actually Robert? You never know, right? So there's all of that. Circling back, she got the poison because the Birdman's like, if you really want to fly, sometimes you have to make the honey yourself. So rather than me doing this, wouldn't it feel better for you to do it yourself? So she goes to kill Miss Brown, but because I keep forgetting if it's like Charlene or Sheila, I can't remember now. But Baba pops up to stop her. Because I didn't bring it up last episode, she saw him in a club too, because despite, once again, not being able to love him, only believes that she loves him and wants to love him, it is interesting how much she misses him so much. Because I think even with the whole seeing thing, I don't think she feels as bad about that, but the real Frederica, she kind of feels bad about that. The Baba thing, she misses him as well. And he stops her from doing it. He's like, I know you, Freddie. Don't do this. And it seems like she does it, and she's like, I forgive you, and she leaves. And she even told Henry, he's like, yeah, I forgave her. Well, we find out she didn't. She ended up killing her, and like she goes, I'm sorry, Bubba, and when she turns, he ends up fading and disappearing. Like, I guess the last little remnants of her consciousness about all of this, and then her asking Henry, like, oh, am I a good person? It's like, no, Freddie, you're not. I was about to say, like, I don't know if I classify you as the worst person. It's like, you're pretty bad, And then, like, everything with Henry, he's like, yeah, you're the best person. And you're like, that's what this is about for you. And she kind of leans into it. They, like, have sex, and you're like, because he loves you. Because for her, that's all she's been looking for, is someone to love. Because we know she can't feel the same way about Henry, because the whole thing with Bubba, it's like she's incapable of loving someone. She wants to love them, but that doesn't mean... So now you're like, okay, so she only likes Henry because Henry loves her, and she's just looking for someone who will actually love her. And it's like, is he supposed to be kind of a replacement for Baba? Is it supposed to be like her kind of moving on and filling that void in her heart? Because it almost feels like, oh, Baba's disappointed in me and he's going for me, like I'll never see him again type of thing. And she's trying to fill that void with Henry. Because she wants him because he wants her, because he loves her, and it's like to be loved by someone. And so she ends up calling Lester and telling him everything between them is over with. She's like, you come near me again, I'll kind of report everything, keep the tapes and all that, because she doesn't need Lester anymore, because now she found someone that's like, who sees her as the best, that she's the greatest and loves her. So she's able to feel that, like, that loneliness and that longing in her heart with someone else. So, or maybe it's just that run-in with Bubba makes her go like, no, Lester, you can't replace Bubba. Like, I thought like our back and forth would be, I thought if I found someone that kind of reminded me of Bubba, then it'd fill that void, but it doesn't. You aren't Bubba, you never will be, and no one could ever replace him, you know? Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but we do see Henry, I was like from the windows looking at her at the phone booth. So there's that element to it. Lola gets the letter that, at least a picture of the letter that Liam found from the one that she got from Birdman. So, which the password is there. So Lola could end up eventually cracking it. It's a very simple password, but it's so simple you would never think of that because it's a very specific word. So, but it's there in that, somewhere in that, and maybe Lola will eventually latch onto it and find it next episode and get access to those messages between them. Either way, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.